Steve, you asked me. Well, I guess this is a surprise podcast in the sense that I knew we were doing a podcast this week. I didn't know we were doing the podcast on Monday until you texted me this morning. And
surprise!
It's not a surprise to our audience that we're doing a podcast. So
not a surprise.
Surprise. That being said, you did text me and said, "Do you want to do the podcast?" And I said, "Sure, if we don't lose power." We have not had the weather, and we can talk about this later, that we were supposed to get. Knock on wood. I will say, though, the wind has just started to pick up, and the neighbor has decided that now is a perfect time to play the music really loudly. Yeah.
What are they playing? Is something good?
Couldn't tell you. He listens to very loud music in his truck, and I don't understand why.
You can hear it in your house from his truck.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So, and I don't think he's deaf.
What kind of truck is it?
It's like a Ford. It must have a good sound system, you know? Anyways, hi everyone. Welcome back. I hope you missed us. Steve's back. I'm glad he's back. The name of this podcast is Stuff Summer Says with
Steve.
In the essence that it is a surprise podcast, we both have a plan and don't have a plan, so we'll see where this evening takes us.
Those are the best kind.
I just want to talk some women's we're going to start with women's sports. We have a couple women's sports things that we should talk about around the Penn State world. Talk some wrestling, as I wrote down here. Maybe we can discuss the financial document and maybe the fact that Penn State might be over-reporting its revenue on its NCAA financial report. So there's that. Yeah, let's see where we go. So Steve was on vacation last week and out of the country, and he's back, and he comes back to some pretty important news that Carolyn Kieger has been fired as Penn State women's basketball head coach after 7 years, an 84-123 record, and probably one of the worst years of Lady Lions basketball, maybe 2 years, honestly, of Lady Lions basketball back to back. I begin with a conversation that I was having with someone recently. And we had this conversation to a degree, you and I as well, recently, of when has women's sports, in particular women's basketball, which I would argue on the pecking order of collegiate sports, goes football, men's basketball, and women's basketball, pretty much in that order, when has it ever mattered more in this country? And when has Penn State women's basketball, when have the Lady Lions ever mattered less in the eyes of Penn State? And I think that is where we begin. I think it was time for Kieger to go. She was very nice and joined us on the podcast, and we will always appreciate that. But at the same time, like I feel like I was brought up that Penn State women's basketball in particular is much better than the men, or much more dependable than the men's team. There is a tradition and a little bit of a culture of winning, maybe not winning at the highest level, but winning, going to Final Fours, going to Sweet 16s, having some truly great women's basketball players, really of all time. And to see it fall off the way it has really since the last 2 years of Coquise all the way back to now, where Kieger could really never find success. And the 1 year that they had it, they kind of shot themselves in the foot with a couple key losses late in the season. All of that is to say, like, what's holding Penn State back from investing, particularly in this era or this team of basketball? Maybe separately from the men, which we can maybe have a conversation about that as well here in a minute.
I think investing is an interesting word. If there's a lack of investment from the athletic department that's holding them back, I mean, let me go this way. If we believe it to be true, and I've been told personally by folks that the men are paying in the bottom half of the Big Ten in NIL for their players. So it's hard for me to believe they're paying more than for the women. So I think what's holding them back from investing is maybe they see a lack of ROI. Like, if they're good, Does it matter? Does it move the needle, which we've talked about before? But bigger picture, in my lifetime of Penn State sports, there hasn't been a program that was as good as the Lady Lions were, that's as bad as the Lady Lions are now. Like there's just they are a one of one in terms of how the athletic program, athletic directors have, coaches, everybody involved have allowed the program to slip. Everybody else across the country's gotten better. They've improved. They've invested, and Penn State is literally going backward, although I think the move to Rec Hall is the right move for the program writ large.
Right.
So I think it's many factors, but man, they've worked well together to make things not as good as they used to be.
That's what I don't understand. And I guess that kind of brings us to a roundabout conversation, both with the men's team, but really in general, is like, what is the ROI? And maybe the better question isn't what is the ROI, is why should we care about the ROI? And I get it. Like, athletic departments right now have never faced the financial struggles or hassles or whatever that they're facing now. But at the same time, why not go win? Why not try to win? And it feels like really on both sides of the hardwood, so to speak, there has not been an emphasis on trying to win or trying to succeed. Really, particularly for the women's team, honestly, since what was the last team that went to the women's tournament? Would have been 16, I think, 2015. Like that's 11 years now. We're kind of entering the same as long as drought as we've entered with the men's team there from 2012 to 2011 to 2023. I don't understand that, and that's where my frustration is, particularly just with Penn State women's basketball in general. But I think that's my frustration when we want to go be competitive in all. We see Penn State wanting to go be competitive in all of these different sports and all of these different areas, and obviously, yes, it like a lot of it funnels through football, but at the same time, I think in some ways, especially now, with trying to find ways to tap into new revenue streams and grow things, like women's sports is on this just super rise that it's so frustrating when you see what's happening versus what the reality that Penn State lives in with the women's team.
Yeah, and I think they could point to some investment this year. They brought the girl over from Rutgers, but I think they knew that she was coming with some baggage in terms of just personality, I guess, that people told me, not associated with, but aside from the program. Oh, they got that girl, but man, I don't know how well that's going to work for the transfer, and she's leaving one Big Ten school for another. They had people who wanted to leave last year, previous year, this year at the end of the season, looked like they were going to be gone, who were important players and ended up staying, whether they found no takers or maybe Penn State invested to retain. So we don't know that part of it, of how much they did invest. But even if they did, they weren't the right decisions. It's great that you have a center who is the most efficient center shot-wise in the country, or whatever those huge numbers were for her in making shots. Okay, but she's taking putbacks and layups, and she's not athletic. Like, you're good enough to beat Bucknell. You're not good enough to play in the Big Ten. So I there is going to need to be more investment for players there to make them good that way. And as much as I really respect and appreciate Coach Kieger for coming on, and my relationship with her through Pink Zone, it was always nice and helpful and friendly. Maybe the players just didn't respond to her. Maybe the alma mater was good and successful in getting here, that transition. And yes, there was COVID, there was rules changes, there was whatever else. It was kind of always uphill. But at some point, you got to get up the hill. And realistically, they waited a week longer than I thought they would to make the move to get rid of her. I thought the Monday after the season was over, it was going to happen sooner because it happened like the end of the week.
Yeah, it was several days. It was long enough to make me ponder.
Yeah, because I was in a meeting, and I was in a building where they were having a meeting of coaches, and out came a couple of women's basketball assistants, and I'm like, they're still employed? Like, yeah. Really, they're still at this meeting. So That was interesting to me. So it's going to matter who they hire. It's going to matter how much they invest. And if the rumors about who their initial hires could be, that could be a good thing for the program. I mean, if it's Tanisha Wright from the WNBA who played here, who played at West Mifflin and Pittsburgh, man, if that person can't right the ship with a little bit of support, maybe you've played your way out of basketball relevancy, which would be a shame because this program wasn't Tennessee and UConn good, but at least it was in the neighborhood.
It was
now
the
it's not
second
even in the
tier.
suburbs.
It was the tier below
Right,
those
right.
guys. Like it genuinely, the resume was. And I don't know what my expectations are. I think my expectations moving forward are for this team to get back on track, certainly. Because if we're just hiring coaches and then firing them 3 years later down the road, like, what's the point of this? I think maybe a little bit longer of a grace period, but what's the point in that? It is also never been as hard. The Big Ten has never been as hard because this is the one sport that like really, like a better term, hurt the 16 or 14 Big Ten teams because of UCLA, USC, and even Oregon joining, like all pretty big powerhouses out west. I want more relevancy from this team, I think, is my expectation. I think that would be first and foremost. They have not been relevant. When the Kieger news broke, like it was like a drop in the bucket, and let's go back to talking about football. Like not that that's never been the way here, but particularly with the women's team, maybe women's volleyball, and certainly wrestling, like at times in my lifetime, they have always been the number 2 attention getter in terms of the second sport, if you will, and it just depends on when it is. Yeah, and I would be thrilled if it was Tanisha Wright. Like I think that's a great hire, right? Like I think it makes total sense. I think that's the other part of this. Pennsylvania, and we talk about this on the men's side too. Pennsylvania has such a great women's and girls high school programs, and so many of them. I felt like Penn State has not been able to tap into that talent the way it has been since. Well, I forget where Alex Bentley behind you is from, but at least Maggie Lucas was from PA, I'm pretty sure. Steve, I jinxed it by saying that I wouldn't lose power, or I didn't lose power today. So here we are finishing up the podcast.
Powering through, as it were.
Yeah, powering through. Good. Yeah, good. Terrible, but also good pun. That's why we pay you the big bucks. Let's pick up with our women's hockey discussion. Let's go there next because I think that's the biggest news, or maybe the biggest thing that has happened for this program. You mentioned it when we were talking last night, and then the power went out. But for a program that has kind of was off to the side a little bit, it has slowly developed into one of the bigger brands in women's hockey, or seems to be headed in that direction. And this feels like the most important step in that journey. They've had great players with Tessa Janicki and Katie Dessa and all of those other players, but they haven't had a team that has challenged. And obviously it comes with their first regional win, hosting their first regional, and now their first Frozen Four this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's a big moment for them because games are free regularly, and people may or may not show up, and there's a hardcore following that does show up. I think this is some exposure that'll be good for them more broadly, that just might get it top of mind for people that weren't there before, and it's an approachable sport. It's a good venue. They're a fun team to watch. I think they'll be a fun team to watch next year. So I think this is a good thing for them as a culmination of the season, no matter how it plays out, and it could play out very well.
I feel like for them in particular, this is success, and I like this is a level of success in part because of the exposure that they're going to get. Do I think that certainly helps that the Frozen Four is on home ice, and that, sure, yes. But in general, this is this is the biggest win that they have had. Like, people will, besides Tessa going to the Olympics and that becoming a relatively, let's say, household name or a more common name in Penn State houses, like, this at least is a recognition of the team that they have not really had. So even if they, which they are up against Wisconsin this weekend, and on the other side of the bracket would be Northeastern, and Ohio State, like, all three of those pretty much you can pick or choose are 1, 2, and 3 in terms of overall. I guess Minnesota being in there as well, like, of overall women's programs of what the gold standard is. Even if they lose this weekend, I think this is a massive step forward for them.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a good weekend for the sport. All those fan bases are close, so they can be here. And Wisconsin softball team's in town, so and they even asked the softball team from Wisconsin asked to move the start time of their game earlier Friday. Penn State said no, so they could make sure they get to the hockey game. They can still get to the hockey game, I'm sure, but I think people will be juiced to be here from all different sides, and it should be a good event. And Penn State has done it before, so I think having a Penn State team in it now after having done it before will make it an even more special event that way.
Yeah. Any other women's hockey thoughts?
No, looking forward to seeing the games. Looking forward. I think that could be fun.
I think so too. You asked a trivia question that I don't have an answer to, but we could pose it. When is the last time has Penn State ever won 2 national championships on the same weekend? And they have a very legitimate shot to do get one of them at least this weekend, and obviously then with the women's team as well. That, of course, being Penn State wrestling. What are Steve Sampsell's expectations for this weekend? What does success look like?
For wrestling, it's another weekend of the Penn State Invitational, right? I think that was my answer one other time we talked about this. I mean, you win with 7 number 1 seeds. Well, I guess my one expectation is Penn State. My expectation is they will succeed. They will do well. They will represent the university well. I'll be interested to see how the fan base responds, right? It's any little thing that isn't in Penn State's favor, it seems like the hardcore people frame as some huge affront, some big plan to knock down. You are the bad guys. I mean, just understand that. And I think that's a mindset change that just befuddles Penn State fans who are the we ares and everybody likes us and they don't like being the bad guy. And the Penn State wrestlers generally aren't the bad guys. So it's always, my expectations is there's going to be some little social media fire somewhere about how Penn State was not acknowledged enough on the broadcast, or not. You know what? Shut up. You're winning. You're the best team in the nation by 1.5 miles or 2. Have fun with it. But my expectation is there will be great success and also some great consternation about something that doesn't matter somewhere along the line.
I wonder what it will be, but I do feel like at least like it seems like they got the seeds right. People were much happier about the seeds this go around than the Big Tens, for sure.
There'll be some announcer they don't like, right? Who says something, and they'll frame it as a cut at the team or a swipe at them. I don't know that that's the case, and even if it is, you are the best program by so far. That people are frustrated with that sometimes, and maybe it's not so far, but it's tough when you're on top.
Not that we are ones to pay attention to sports books and all of that, but I did see that. I think it's FanDuel. It's a prominent sports book. Has odds, and the bet is basically the first place team besides Penn State. Like, I think that kind of speaks to the bad guy or maybe problem or lack of problem, or just everybody else is so much inferior kind of complex. And I think that's a fair point. And I do think that, yes, you're right. Like, knowing how this has gone, particularly the last 4 years, I'm sure it will happen. 4? Would you assume 4 is 4? There are 4 names that I would give champions to, or I could see. Mitch.
Yeah, I think that
Levi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Luke. And Shane. Those 4? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be 4.
And maybe 3 of those 4.
For sure. And I think you can look at maybe they're going to set another record for for points, although it doesn't feel like at times they've been as dominant. You know, although I know the points, when you look at the points piled up by people individually, Penn State says they look at the Hodge Award and some other things, that the numbers could back that up. But there'll be some challenges. There'll be some surprises, but there won't be a shock. That there's not going to be that they don't win. And I think that's great for Penn State wrestling. It is clearly as dynastic as you can be in this era. And I don't believe they're throwing as much money at individuals as some other schools are. So I think that's great and something to lean into. But there'll be something. There'll be one little hiccup somewhere that'll be a kerfuffle that people are like, oh my gosh, look at what they hate us. They're against us. They're biased towards us. And meanwhile, you're winning your 4th championship in a row and you're 13th overall. And if that's the worst thing to happen to you, okay. You know, so. And they've been local too. That's the other thing. We're Cleveland again this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like this run has been nice with Cleveland and Philly and Cleveland before. Like it's a nice run for that. So I am thrilled for their success. It is otherworldly on the mat what they're doing, and there'll be a couple challenges, but the Penn State Invitational in Cleveland will finish with the Penn State winning another national championship.
Okay. Do they win it by Saturday morning?
It'll be close. Yeah.
Usually, it's usually like Saturday morning is the over under of.
And that's the thing, right? Even if they do, the sport has to exist in some other way. There needs to be more storylines than just that for the sport itself to be healthy. So if they do, okay, great. And you don't need to be acknowledged every 3 minutes on the broadcast that, yep, they're the national champions, and they're the presumptive national champions, or if they've got it wrapped up, and here's this guy on that mat. It's okay for the sport to be healthy, to embrace some other success from some other places, because what they need is a challenger. What they need, I think, to help the sport be strong is a challenge. I mean, Pat McAfee did a segment yesterday, I guess, about Penn State, and I think that's great in their dominance. But what's going to make this matter is if, God forbid, they schedule Oklahoma State non-conference next year, or there's some place where they go get tested in a way that isn't the I mean, they're excellent, but there's a ho-humness to it that a little bit of a challenger would make even better for the sport.
Well, and I mean, obviously Iowa, I think one of the brothers said that this was the worst year for them professionally. And Iowa there for a while, particularly pre-COVID, right towards pre-COVID, like they were that for them. And it seems like, to your point, it's maybe Oklahoma State is the second answer in this question. But I do agree with you about the point. And I do think last year, and I'm forgetting the guy's name that beat Gable Stevenson, that was actually the bigger story, because Stevenson came back and all of his stuff and came back to wrestle and was going to go for that title, and then loses pretty dramatically. Like that was, but I think that's where, and we talk about this plenty, but like I think that's where they've struggled with, where wrestling has struggled with, to your point, like the other storylines, because this is the, like, in a way, it's, oh, Penn State's going to win. That's the storyline. What else is going to come out of nationals that is going to reverberate? Probably nothing, unless Penn State would lose, right? Like that would be the only other storyline.
No, and then for McAfee to give him attention, because the challenge is for wrestling is there's not a big stage. I mean, it's ESPN, but it's still not a big stage that's going to get ratings numbers like some other things do, because it's just wrestling, and there's nothing wrong with that. Be excellent at what you're excellent at, and lean into it. But you're just not going to get more attention than you're not going to get more attention than the first weekend of the basketball tournament.
No,
sure, it's the national championship, and this is the first weekend of March Madness. First weekend of March Madness is going to have many more highlights on SportsCenter and other places than the mainstream places. But that's why the wrestling outlets exist, and that's why those things, fans know where they're going for information, and it's great no matter what. Penn State wins.
Is this the best sports weekend of the year? I think at least collegiately it is.
Yeah, the basketball carries 90% of what makes that great. But yeah, because you have back-to-back competition that's meaningful. We're into one and done. Everybody talks about Game 7 in the pros. Oh, Game 7 and the drama. Every game is a Game 7 in all these instances. So yeah, that's what makes it interesting. and it is a very good weekend.
You have wrestling, you have women's hockey's Frozen Four, you have the conferences wrapping up on the men's side. Like I think this is one of my favorite sports weekends of the year. Yeah. You have a bracket strategy this year, Steve? Or are you gonna fill out a bracket this year?
I have to fill one out. Yeah, I'm usually the one who sends it out to everybody, so I'm behind on that, so I need to get that done. No strategy, because the amount of time that I've watched men's basketball this year
Little to none
is minimal.
Yeah.
I'm probably, my strategy is to apply 1986 logic, the last time I was really paying attention to full seasons, to 2026 bracketology, which probably isn't going to go well.
It's I think my strategy this year, it's not one bracket strategy. I'm going to try to fill out as many brackets as possible. Like, I think I'm going to try to fill out 100 brackets and just see what happens.
See, I'm a sheet of integrity guy, even though I suck.
And that's fair.
That's it.
I have been one of those types of people all of my life, and I think it's time to just, like, I want to test the game theory of just randomness.
Yeah. No, I think my strategy is to make sure I inform the girls and Susan and son-in-laws, and here it is, and get it
figured out,
built out.
Okay. Are you a pen and paper kind of guy, or are you doing this digitally?
No, I just do it digitally, and then I'll print it out and try to remember what I did. Okay. Yeah, because that's the problem, right? Because what happens is I'll fill it out later today or tonight, and then sometime Thursday I'll be rooting against one of the teams that I picked because I forgot who I picked.
There it is. Love that. Let's see. What else? Still looking into the whole Penn State financial report thing. We talked about this a couple episodes back. If we basically remove the contributions or the NIL spending from the contributions, that shows that Penn State more or less like overreported, because it appears they are the only school now, with a little bit more of clarity on a bunch of other reports, appears they're the only school in the country that filled out the NIL revenue portion, trying to ask some questions and get some answers on that. So hopefully we get something from that. I do think that is interesting. I do think one of the basketball conversations we were having, a good example of that is Matt Brown, who was on the podcast. He collects all of them and all of the financial reports and ranks them. If you take what Penn State spent or reportedly spent out of the report, it puts them 7th in basketball spending. But once you remove the NIL spending, it puts them dead last in the Big Ten in basketball spending. And it's like that type of difference is important as we are comparing Penn State to other schools. So that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to dig in on this. So that was...
Someday there'll be a salary cap and the numbers will be all the same for everybody, and it'll just be easier.
Yeah. No, and
that's not true, because they'll still cheat. I mean, that's the thing. Everybody talks about the NCAA and the problems and government helping, and
yeah, I don't know what
the NCAA is. The schools, like they here's the rule, and everybody tries to figure out a way to get around it. So
yeah, I don't know. I think the government has other problems it needs to fix when it comes to that. Okay. Anything else you want to discuss on the core agenda before we get to old guy and guy?
No, that's it. Here we go.
Okay. You asked me an important question. What is I'll defer to you first. What is your method for monitoring the weather? How do you go about your weather monitoring? You're still a local news guy. Like
we're still old, right? So there'll still be a local news thing, yeah. And then the app, whether it's the one that's already on the phone or AccuWeather, and just to check what's going on. And as you know, you were predicted to have really strong stuff last night, and didn't happen. We were predicted to have some stuff, and I don't know that I thought it was exactly what we got this morning. So I kind of pay attention, but know it may underdeliver, but at least I'm prepared for what it's supposed to have happen, but maybe what might not.
I think that's a fair way to know that, especially up your way, know that you can go through every season, especially this time of year, go through every season within one day. That's fair. Generally locked in to AccuWeather. I tell you what though, on Twitter, all the people that talk about and post about weather, that's a lot of, like many other things on Twitter, a lot of mumbo gumbo that just very confusing, and it seems like a lot of people arguing over the same thing for no reason. So
I think if you're diehard and know the models, like at least one of our listeners does and pays attention to, you can be very well informed, right? And then there's a lot of different options, and you can know what it means. I try to sort of know what it means and go from there.
Show me your radar. Show me the ballpark temperature for the next couple days, and we're good to go. You know?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, that's this week's show. I don't know what else. Maybe we'll noodle on some basketball thoughts. We'll see when Penn State announces a women's coach. I'm sure we'll have some wrestling stuff. Steve might be headed to the women's Frozen 4. Yeah, we'll have stuff this week on the blog. You can find that blog at stuffsummersays.com. On that blog, there's a section called With Steve. We've got emails. Mine's Darian at stuffsummersays.com. Steve's is
Steve at stuffsummersays.com.
Perfect. We've got a podcast which you've listened to. 5 stars, thumbs up, as we trek through all of our technical difficulties, but we're getting there. And then lastly, you can find me on the internet at Stuff Summer Says. You can find Steve
At Steve Samsel.
See ya. Bye.